Legislature is back in session, still on the second reading. The next bill is Bill number 25-38 COR. I recognize the gentlelady from Mingilo, Pago Bay. Ma'am, you're recognized.
Hafidades and Mananasidus, Mr. Speaker, and to our colleagues. Many of God's blessings to all of us here in the listening audience. I'd like to move bill number 25-38 COR as amended by the Committee on Finance and Government Operations, is introduced by myself, Tina Rose Munya Barnes, which is an act to amend Section 8104 of Chapter 8, Title 5, Guam Code Annotated, relative to modernizing public hearing notice requirements by authorizing the posting of public notices in locally licensed electronic newspapers and websites. To the third reading, Mr. Speaker, and if I could have the opportunity to speak on it.
Please proceed.
Mr. Speaker, and before I do my opening statement, I guess the main intent of this legislation, again, is to expand the definitions of public notices to include electronic newspapers, websites, and other eligible media platforms, but also to save government some resources. So thank you for this opportunity, Mr. Speaker, to speak on Bill 25-38. And like I said, just with the intent, two simple goals: to get more people informed about upcoming meetings where boards, commissions, and departments making decisions that affect their lives, and to save the government of Guam money when purchasing mandatory notices of these meetings. Unfortunately, along the way, some of my colleagues have taken to conspiracy theories and troublesome statements to oppose this common sense measure. So, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to take the time now to reflect on our history and our present circumstances, to take a fair and even-tempered look at this bill 25-38. Mr. Speaker, back in 1975, this legislature laid the framework for a commitment to transparency known as the Open Government Law, which requires that local government meetings are open to the public, and importantly, are noticed reasonably to give stakeholders and affected constituents time to prepare their feedback and make arrangements to attend and participate in these discussions. Now, Mr. Speaker, almost 50 years later, responding to calls from our media partners and in recognition of the change in the consumer landscape that comes with decades of innovation, this bill proposes the first meaningful reform on what are the best platforms that can get the word out of these critical events. As offered during testimony, during the testimony given at Bill 25-38's public hearing, our two remaining local newspapers confirmed what should be easy for all of us to see, is that more people get their news on digital platforms like their websites than to pick up a physical copy of their publication. And that plain fact, Mr. Speaker, is what this measure is literally trying to incorporate into our decades-old standard of what media platforms gets the most number of people each day. And after all, colleagues, isn't the whole point of this law to inform as many of our residents as possible? I want to say, Mr. Speaker, take the Guam PDN as an example. The last time they printed their paper, they had about 3,000 copies purchased each day. compared to last year, where they averaged 9,700 unique visitors each day. I want to tell you, Mr. Speaker and colleagues, that's more than 300% higher than their physical printed paper. But today, it would be illegal for the government to advertise on this website, even though many more people visit it each day than used to read its publication. I don't think that makes much sense. So, to be clear, this measure does not get rid of any existing illegible platforms from the open government law. In fact, it expands, not shrinks, the network of local media partners. And amazingly, I heard opposition to this improvement that somehow adding news websites would result in fewer people being informed. But it's a common misconception that there are only a select few media that can get these advertising dollars under the current law. In fact, Mr. Speaker, according to the testimony provided by the PDN and the Guam Daily Post, there are about 10 media companies, from printed newspapers to radio and television stations, that are eligible today to publish or broadcast open government law notices. Yet, Mr. Speaker, I don't see anyone rushing to change the law because 10 potential places to find these notices is too many. Perhaps because we already have in place a mandatory central hub for these advertisements, a government-run website found at notices.guam.gov. While how many platforms is too many is an answer based on opinions, this bill, Mr. Speaker, also makes an improvement that is based on an indisputable fact. Digital ads cost less than print ads. And I will once again reference the testimony provided by our local newspapers, where the Guam Daily Post confirmed that their digital ads are indeed more affordable. So for PDN, their current digital rates are about 40% cheaper than their old print rates. And while the Post told us that their digital rates are typically 25% lower than their printed rates. So in a scenario where the government spends over $100,000 on these ads, which is possible because many agencies and boards meet more than once a month, that's a savings of anywhere, and I'm going to say anywhere from $40,000 and even higher, and certainly enough to help the cost of supplies and utilities for cash-strapped operations. So I did, however, Mr. Speaker, take on board a very understandable concern that this bill may open the door to the fly-by-night companies that are built and dismantled in a day. So to the media organizations that haven't demonstrated a public trust or a substantial readership, and I'm really thankful to the members of the committee that Bill 25 was referred to for adopting in committee, Mr. Speaker, two important amendments to the markup. And the first, I would like to say, would require an eligible platform to be in business here on Guam for 5 years, and the second would require every company bidding on these ads to submit a third-party verification of its audience, and that number must be at least 15% of Guam's population. So, Mr. Speaker, this would mean The only media companies where these notices will be placed are ones that have proven it can stand the test of time and provide engaging and informative content to a large enough share for our island residents. So, Mr. Speaker, we've worked hard and compromised along the way to make improvements happen for our people. So I humbly ask that my colleagues support this measure and simple proposal to get our people informed and to save our government some money. So thank you for the opportunity for me to speak on this bill number 25-38, and truly ask that our colleagues look into this measure and provide an opportunity for more folks in our community to have access to our open government law as it relates to hearing and seeing notices out there. So thank you again, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back to you, Sinamasi.
Thank you, ma'am. On the bill, are there any discussion? The lady from Tumuning, you are recognized.
Sujus Masi, Mr. Speaker, and good morning to my colleagues and the listening audience. Before I start with my opening remarks with the Bill 25-38, first, if I'm not mistaken, did the author of the legislation said there was amendment? Because I looked in the drive and I didn't see any amendments.
Mr. Speaker, if I may, the bill was amended in committee.
Oh, okay.
And those concerns were inserted by the committee, and I thank them for doing the markup on this measure.
Okay, I just wanted to verify because I wasn't sure if there was another amendment on the floor. However, Mr. Chair, I'd like for us to take an opportunity to ask legal a question with regards to the substituted version as amended in committee. There was a 15% threshold that was incorporated in there. This 15% threshold may be substantive to the bill, meaning not allowing the public to actually have an opportunity to talk about a 15% because maybe some of the media conglomerates in our community would not be able to meet that and would not have the opportunity to speak on this 15% requirement that is new to the bill. So I'm asking if we can have legal review that for a substantive, if this bill is substantive now.
Before we do that, I want to give the opportunity to the author and maybe to the oversight chair to be able to discuss the what was amended in committee.
Mr. Speaker, if I may, just based on that, and in the recommendation of the making sure that we don't have fly-by-night, one-day business startups, that there was a provision in place that these outlets or these vendors would have been in business for 5 years, and that there was a listening and a seeing audience receivership of 15%. And that was not my recommendation. That was the recommendation of those who appeared in the public hearing. So we're talking about substantial change. It was based on the public hearings review and the committee oversight chair, which I was very appreciative of wanting to make these recommendations and insert it into the committee, into the amended version of the bill. So thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much. Let me take a minute recess, please. Back in session. After discussion with legal counsel, the concern that was brought up by the gentle lady from Tamuning, with regard to basically germaneness and whether or not this meets the standard. It does. And so the amendments were provided and inserted as a result of discussions in the public hearing and then discussed in markup of the committee. So it was in the committee's recommendation that it was the amendments were inserted for the presentation on the floor. So it stands.
Mr. Speaker, to add to that point of information, please.
I'm going to recognize the gentleman for Tamuning for the point of information.
So if you also go into the committee report and you see with the testimony on the bill in the public hearing, there was clearly a desire for a definition. And that was the purpose for the markup, a definition to clarify what are, first and foremost, to establish, what would be a legitimate entity, and that's why the 5 years was put in, and the other was a credible ability to verify their reach, and that was the other amendment to verify that they are a bona fide, basically, by this definition. And if you look at other testimonies, you will see that those are actually put in, particularly under PDN, was put into their testimony in terms of their reach on their online. So we basically wanted to spread that across the board. It's a very substantive amendment, but it was a substantive amendment that was discussed during the public hearing and on the markup, and the bill's been up from markup for a long time. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. So
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. However, based on the last comments made, this can substantially change the ability for some media conglomerates out there to be able to post, because they don't meet the 15% mark that was established. And that's the big issue. We don't have an opportunity for them to come forward to this body and explain why they think they should be able to, maybe lower it down to at least 10%, or maybe some may want 25%. But the point is, we didn't give it to the people to discuss, and that was my concern, allowing the public input on something that substantially changed. But you did your ruling, Mr. Speaker, and I will respect that and move on. If I may?
you can proceed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And to my colleagues, I rise today to address a matter of great importance: dissemination of government notices and critical information to the people of Guam, the people we serve. The proposed bill to allow bloggers and social media platforms to serve as a primary channels for such notices, in my view, is premature, inadequate, and without challenges. Limited access in Guam. Let us begin with that. The reality is that broadband infrastructure, we have received some funding to assist those areas that don't have bandwidth or Wi-Fi, or even accurate enough Wi-Fi that it doesn't keep dropping. Grants have been allocated to address underserved areas. The fact remains that many of our residents, mostly in the South, still lack reliable internet access. This is not a problem that will be solved overnight. Until we achieve a wider spread connectivity, relying on online platforms like bloggers or social media excludes a significant portion of our population, particularly those in remote areas. How can we, in good conscience, adopt a system that leaves so many behind? Exclusions of our seniors. We must all consider our senior citizens, who, by the way, are the majority of voters in our community, who continue to rely on traditional newspapers for their information. These newspapers, whether in print or digital format, maintain a high readership and trust Remember that word, trust, among the demographics. Shifting to bloggers or social media would alienate these individuals, leaving them uninformed about critical government updates. Are we prepared to abandon our elders in the name of convenience? Unreliable moderation practices is another concern, which lacks an accountability in bloggers' world. Bloggers have the autonomy to delete comments or block users they disagree with. This raises serious questions about transparency and impartiality. Government notices must be disseminated through reliable and unbiased channels, free from personal agendas or censorship. Cost versus reach. Yes, newspapers may come at a higher cost price tag, but the investment is worth it. The cost ensures that information reaches the masses, including those without internet access. Equitable access to government notice is not just a financial matter, it's a moral obligation. Legislative enforcement issues, the proposed bill is fundamentally flawed. It lacks enforcement requirements, opening the door for anyone to create a social media account, obtain $25 business license, and then incorporate that they have a readership or a audience of 15%. This undermines the integrity of the process and raises ethical concerns about favoritism and misuse of public funds. Is this the kind of governments we want to endorse? Future considerations: when Guam achieves comprehensive broadband coverage and digital literacy improves across all our demographics, we can revisit this legislation. I have no issues in incorporating digital into the bill. But the problem is, it's allowing anybody to open up a blog or start on their social media and then indicate that they have a readership of 15%. Who monitors that? Who's going to pay to watch them every day to see if they come up? One of legitimate news would have an issue with the 15%. Someone that invested years, how many years they've been on this island to provide unbiased news. In conclusion, in summary, prioritizing bloggers or social media for government notices, and that's exactly what this bill does by opening that gate, is premature. Traditional and trusted channels like newspapers remain the most effective way to ensure information reaches all residents. If we're worried about saving funding, we have a website at the legislature. The government of Guam has a porthole that puts all information there on public hearings. Let's not compromise transparency and fairness or accessibility for the sake of funds. Our people deserve that. They pay their taxes. They pay their taxes to be informed. I object to this bill and ask my colleagues to think about what was said. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, ma'am. On the bill, are there any other colleague senator wishing to?
Point of order, Mr. Speaker. I don't believe the
Point of
bill
order.
that we are discussing on the floor is in conformance with our standing rules. It does not show the accurate statute and what is being amended in the statute. And I'm asking council to confirm. The other thing, Mr. Speaker, in a separate point of order, I'm trying to confirm how the notice for the public hearing on this bill was made, and the committee report does not show where the notice for the public hearing was published. The committee report also is incomplete. It doesn't show the testimony and the questions from senators and the answers given by those who were present. So I can't tell what their answers were at this point from some of the questions. It seems to refer us back to the video. I'm pretty sure that in 2 years, no one's going to be able to find which video goes with which public hearing or which committee report. And I think that's a disservice to the people, and it's very hard for us to do our work. If you look, there's a section in the committee report where there's, let's see. It's after the intro of the bill by the sponsor, and then it says questions and discussion. And 52 or 50 minutes worth of discussion, not transcribed in here. We don't even know who spoke during that period, because all who's been transcribed in the committee report are the sponsor of the bill and the chairperson of the committee, and the original testimony of the Daily Post and the PDN, but not the questions and answers that happened after that. Or at least 50 minutes of it I can't find in here. It just says questions and discussion begins at 2:06:47 and ends at 2:52:04. No. So I raise those 3 points of order, Mr. Speaker.
Point of information, Mr. Speaker. On the other 2 points, we'll discuss, and I'd like to also go and talk to legal. This was cleared by CORE as meeting the requirements, and I will read the section of the standing rules with regard to testimony. With regard to question and answer, it is a digital presentation where you can push on that, and I believe that that's a footprint that's eternal in our digital age, and you can view and review all the questions, answers in that format. And that passed CORE, and CORE agreed that this is a proper representation for the committee report. And so we can discuss with CORE on that as well, but that, as far as we were concerned and we were told by CORE, has met our requirements. That is all the questions and answers. In fact, you can get the emphasis of individuals answering the questions and asking the questions because you can watch it. And I'll read the other section in a little while in terms of what testimony is required and what question and answer version is required. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. We're going to take a 1-minute recess. Colleagues, we're going to stand in recess until 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. Recess until 9 a.m.